High among the northern latitudes, an ocean current sweeps along Alaska's southern coast, bringing warmth where there should only be ice and snow. Halfway along its journey, it passes the mouth of Kachemak Bay, where it has combined with abundant water, timber, coal, and rich soil to produce an environment unique to Alaska. The first European settlers were the Russians, who settled at Kasilov in 1786 to trade for sea otter pelts with the Tenina Indians. The English followed the Russians in the late 19th century with a coal mining operation at Bluff Point near the site of present-day Homer. A railroad was built from the mines to a coaling station at the end of the spit, and in 1898 the community of Homer came into being. Its namesake was Homer Pennock, head of the Alaska Gold Mining Company. The original settlement of Homer on the Spit was destroyed by fire during a violent storm and re-established on the benches below the hills where present-day Homer is located. The first farms in the Homer area began in 1915. The first schoolhouse was built in 1919, and the first road was constructed in 1925. By the mid-1930s, many homesteaders began to move into Homer. Homesteading universally was a family way of life. It required the will and the commitment of the complete family. Unlike any other adventure, homesteading was a marriage of life and land. One of the homesteading families whose presence at Homer has spanned 3 generations and has contributed significantly to the history of Alaska is the Kilcher family. While life on the Kilcher homestead was in many ways typical of homesteading in Alaska, it was unique in that the family documented its day-to-day life on motion picture film. This rare collection of footage is the only filmed chronicle in color of a pioneer family's life over a period of 30 years. For the Kilcher children, the document is a personal and joyous bond to their parentage and their home place. For the rest of us, it is a legacy to our collective heritage. Kilcher.
My ancestors always have rebelled against exploitation, against cities. They liked the simple, free village life, had quite an interesting cultural life in these mountainous areas of northern Switzerland. And it seems like in every generation there was in my family, there was somebody that had a little bit more than the normal amount of urge of independence.
Both of my grandfathers were quite political. In fact, one of them founded his own then radical political party. One of his 6 sons, my father, had the good instinct in 1913 to interrupt his government career and to buy a little farm so that we children could eat during World War I, which he saw on the horizon. He provided the best education for all of us children. I studied in Switzerland, France, and Germany during Hitler's ascent in Europe. With young people's usually sharp insight, 3 of us young Swiss, 2 German boys and a few girls, decided to start a better and simpler life away from the looming catastrophe. Having traveled a lot before, I was chosen to scout for the best possible spot. And I set out acquiring practical knowledge, first learning English in England, and then working during the Depression as an axeman in the Swedish forests. With hard work, I saved enough to travel and hitchhike through America, and finally got as far as Alaska in 1936. Reporting back to my friends in Europe, I found my group unable to get money and visas together, so I went ahead alone to break the ground. A year later, one of the Swiss girls got a visa. She traveled through France, and I married her off the boat in Alaska. Ruth, the mother of our 6 daughters and 2 sons. After 4 years of building a grubstake, we finally were able to homestead in Kachemak Bay.
There was nothing here, just an old fox farmer's cabin, a tiny little stable tumbled down that they had to brace up, just enough room enough for a horse and a cow, half a dozen of chickens. I had to cut the trail down to the bluff with a mattock and an axe and a shovel, and logged the whole winter once, just before the days of the chainsaw with the axe and saw, and got the logs together. We started building that cabin, which took a couple of years, and so on. There was 2 or 3 farmers. During the war, farming was quite active. There was about 10, 15 farmers during the war. We sold our produce in Kodiak. A barge came over every 2 or 3 weeks, and they picked up stuff here. I had a milk cow, and the first summer we sold cottage cheese and butter in town. And I had a little truck garden, so every week or 2 I packed stuff into home at 12 miles and made about $600 net. We made it an art to live off the country by eating wild vegetables, living off the game, the fish, and essentially a simple, satisfying life. My father was an expert mushroom gatherer in Switzerland, had books and things, which I took with me when I came here. To my great surprise, I found that most varieties of European Arctic mushrooms grow in Alaska also. So we had lots of edible mushrooms around here. Berries, we always picked berries. And I learned a lot of things here from pioneers, neighbors. I never thought about eating nettles, for instance. The nettle is one of the best vegetables. Very good tasting, very rich in many regards.
Like most coastal homesteaders in those days, I had to look for additional income. The handiest thing to do then was the relatively short, though dangerous, fishing for red salmon in Bristol Bay in the Bering Sea. "1,200 men fished in those days. 1% was expected to lose their lives, but with a little luck, you could make a neat sum of money.
Town of Homer was kind of nice. It had about 300 people when I came here. The people in Homer got together and built their own dock. Very cooperative. Every spring, they got together and burned the whole country. Way back, the people got together to strung telephones for 20 miles. Posts and the typical old hand-crank telephone. And the people got together for dances. They had little amateur shows and theaters, quite a bit of talent. Piano players, fiddlers. We had fairs, we had booth. The 300 people, there were a few farmers, some fishermen, and there was a good community spirit.
As more settlers moved in, we formed the Cattlemen's Association, sent one of the young men out to acquire some purebred, white-faced cattle. After they unloaded them from a freighter, moved down to the beach through my place to reach their own ranches. The offspring of these cattle now count into the hundreds. It is quite an industry in Homer now to raise good beef in the relatively mild climate. My oldest ranch neighbor, Mr. Maddox, once had a breakdown on the beach. He traveled 25 miles with horse and wagon through rough drift ice and over rocks. He was a little embarrassed when I asked him the reason for his trip. I thought maybe he was sick or he was out of grub. But he told me with a sheepish grin, he being an old bachelor, well, he heard that there was a dance in the village Saturday night. He was kind of lonely up on his ranch. Another one of my new neighbors helped me set up a little sawmill driven with a old pickup engine. I sold a few boards to neighbors. He took his share in lumber for a building of his own. One of the daughters is old enough to help on the mill. So to some extent, technology has made its entrance on the place. We were still too far away from a school which to some point suited us. We taught the children at home. They didn't have to waste 3 hours on the way to and from school, as they later did. They had time to run in the woods, learn what mother and father could tell them, to play on the beaches, to get acquainted with nature and its many lovable creatures. The woodpecker, where mother would feed its young, in the middle of the yard, unafraid of the children. Not too distant, the rivers, where brown bear would fish as they have done for thousands of years before even Eskimos and Indians did it. Where the salmon, the jumping fish, by the 100,000s would ascend the rivers from the faraway Pacific Ocean, heading home to the headwaters, to the creeks where they were spawned 3-4 years before. When the rivers were chock full of fish, almost more fish than water in places, where Mother Bear is teaching the young to eat fish when they normally eat grass only and berries in fall. The cow moose in the cow pasture, the moose in the high country, the bear that occasionally the children would meet later on the way to school. Unforgettable adventures. In summer the days are long and there is plenty of work to do to put up the hay for the horses and the cow in winter. Old country fashion, wherever there was a meadow big enough to cut hay, we put up a stack. And in fall we broke a piece of new ground for the garden next year. With my younger son and some friends, I'm still breaking ground now and then. I still have my subsistence net on the beach each late summer when the silver salmon hits our bay. And I'm certainly grateful to this fellow who in Colorado 40-some years ago told me about the thousands of tons of coal laying around on the beach. I haul it home on my trailer, where coal is the main fuel on the place and always will be. A pile of 10, 15 tons will hold me through the winter. It is a rather hard lignite coal, some of it sub-bituminous, some of it almost good enough as blacksmith coal. One of the things that I didn't know before I did it was I just love to bake bread. We grind our wheat here with a little hand grinder. I use exclusively sourdough. Sometimes put in a few fistfuls of powdered nettles, which is a very healthy vegetable. That's the stinging nettle, a great plant. And I became quite famous for bread baking. That's one of the things I unabashedly brag about. My bread is known from here to Anchorage, from Anchorage to New York. In fact, I sometimes suspect that you fellows came here just to take my bread, which is a compliment. I don't think anything is ever done, and I don't think I'm done here. I'm just in a new phase. The first stage is done. Someday there will be a few more families living here. This is a school on many levels. I intend to have craftsmen here, craft teachers, disciplined, dedicated people. We have thousands of tons of coal on the beaches. We have good timber and fine soil. The sea and the forest is rich in proteins. This is perfect for an experiment, possibly more than an experiment. If this civilization is ever to crash, which I think it will, like all others before it, sooner or later it will. Give it 10 years, give it 100 years. But I think a simple way of life will ultimately be the better way to survive, whatever happens in the future, than the complex civilization, which is essentially very brittle. I'm pleased to see that 5 of my 8 children live in Alaska, 4 of them quite close by here. My younger son shows more and more of an interest in moving back out to the place. Once in a while, the family gets together. Grandchildren do visit. They go on Grandpa's farm. They learn a few tricks. Learn how to handle tools. Learn about the berries. And learn about the mushrooms. It's a good feeling when the family can get together. Today, they all came to visit, except my second oldest daughter and the children's mother. A good woman, good writer and poet, whose dreams for many years matched my own, but with the family grown and mostly gone, our ways separated again. And now she is pursuing her own dreams. Let's sing the simplest one that we used to sing, right?
Row the boat.
Everybody can do it? Everybody can row?
Row, row, row your boat.
Row, row, row the boat. Row, row, row the boat. Gently down the boat. Gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is just a dream. Gently down the stream. Gently down the stream.
You would watch it is. Signal.
Watch out on the
If you don't want your potatoes, if you want it over here.
You know,
Oh ja, je kan niet proberen te springen. Ja, joh. Had je like on the ball.
looking ready down there?
You're ready. We're ready. Let's go.
Okay.
Who knows?
I'm next.
I know it. I was everything's back up there. Come back, my melody sings of the autumn sunset and the spring morning.
My closest friends were my family. You know, I'd play with my family. That was what I'd do. Even though I was away, we were away from society, there was something, I never felt isolated. I never felt like I was missing out. You see, everyone ended up doing everything, but it just depended. By the time you were 14, you moved on to the next job, and the next kid took over. It was sort of a progression, a hierarchy of jobs, you know.
We'd always go mushroom hunting and come back with just buckets and buckets of mushrooms, and we had our own little places everywhere, you know, that we went for different kinds of mushrooms. I used to love to just go into the woods, I guess, just to get away from everything and the work.
People had these wonderful ideas of, oh, homesteading life, and you're living in the middle of nature and away from the rat race of the city and all. But when you're building up a homestead, it's like, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. I mean, you can't leave for a weekend to go visit friends because there's a cow that has to be milked twice a day.
I always get a little sad that I can't come back and it isn't the same. I still have twinges of that. The way that she raised us was, she gave us a lot of the artistic and a lot of the spiritual and musical, just from even just being there and working and being the example of just working really hard.
Felt real cultured. Like there was music in our lives. Even before we had the phone, we had the piano in our house. And my father would tell us stories from Europe. We'd sing songs at dinner time instead of saying grace from all over the world in different languages. And so there was this real expansive feeling to our lives, like we knew about the whole world. So I never felt apart.
When I used to go to school here, all the kids used to have their little Oreo cookies, and I used to have these burnt, mangled-looking oatmeal things, and I always was a little embarrassed. Looking back, it's like, I guess I was getting more nutrition, and oatmeal cookies taste better than Oreos anyway. I remembered I wasn't that crazy about it, but there were a lot of good times in between all the hard working times, though, and that made it worth it.
From the outside, it looks very charming and looks very wonderful, and the ideas behind it in terms of finding fulfillment in nature and living a simple life and living a natural life are beautiful. But if you're not strong emotionally or physically, I mean, it can be real draining, you know?
Well, occasionally, of course, like every father, I think I could have done better, should have done better, yet disappoint a little bit here and there, but then again, trying to be objective, which I manage once in a while, I must say that by and large, my children turned out very well. Very well. They are all great individuals. They are talented. They are, have a lot of self-confidence, and their particular life on this here place that might have been harsh occasionally was more beautiful than it would have been any other place, and they realize it, begin to realize it. Some of them, you see, and that's I consider this a success. That makes me happy.
At one stage of the game, I thought they would all more or less just simply follow in my footsteps, you know. Every father, every parent thinks that to point. But it didn't take me too long to realize that this was a exaggerated hope, and not too big a disappointment either. In fact, when I was resigned to the fact that none of them might see things my way, one or the other, 2 or 3 of them, came around and just about when I was ready to give up, say, hey, don't give up, we see now what you mean, keep it going. My youngest son, for instance, he's the one that comes out here the most, so I'm not disappointed in those ways. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and I'm pretty positive, confident about it, you know.
That's got to be so you can save the hair from the back of your hand any time during your day's work. You know why I go up and down like that?
Get the bevel right.
Yeah, that's right. You see, you get one hick, you got to take the whole darn axe down that far.
Uh-huh.
That's the problem. Just a little hick, but the whole axe got to go down a 64th or a 32nd.
How come you use a stone rather than a file?
The stone makes a smoother job, and it's cheaper. Files are very expensive. You got a stone that lasts you a lifetime.
It ain't so easy, is it?
No, it takes a lot of work. It's like grinding flour.
Well, are you duly repenting now for being so careless with the sharp axe? Developing a respect, huh? Great.
That's beautiful. Much better job than I've ever seen a file do.
Yep.
You say you learned that in Sweden?
Yep. That's it. See?
Okay.
You have an axe again.
All right. Can I see it?
There is a relatively large percentage of the young who have very sound instincts in those respects and want to return to simpler ways. It's difficult to do. A lot of them, of course, feel unhappy about the way things are now and romantically hope that simple way of life would solve all of their problems, which of course it won't do. It's a paradox there somehow that this complex
Look at this stuff here.
way of life, of modern life, in a way is simpler than the so-called simple way of life of the old days was. A lot of the young that want the simple life find out it is not so simple. It's actually simpler to live on the customary complex modern life.
Watch out.
I put them all in a little circle like this.
Beautiful.
Another one.
Beautiful.
I pick them out, and I did that for 35 years, since 1943. A fellow gave me these Arctic seedlings. They were very popular in those days, you know, and he had them hill selected for 15 years previous. That makes it 50 years by now. See?
Yeah.
Every year I pick out the nicest hills, and that will be my next year's seed.
Yeah.
And then I pick the nicest again. I always pick the nicest for next year's seed. And so I have a very nice strain here, healthy potatoes. Look at that shape here, man.
Yeah.
See here? Look at those here. Smooth, nice. Finest pickers. They're getting popular again, I hear. They have all these Russians and these mealy potatoes imitating the Idaho spuds, you know. Now I'm one of the few guys who got this Arctic seedling left, you know, and they are interested now.
Well, are you still selecting?
Oh, yeah, every year.
Every year you select
oh, yeah.
more.
Well, it's a hobby, you know. So the neighbors appreciate it too. They get good seed that way too, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This place will become spiritually and technologically self-sufficient. Maybe with a 14th century technology. I still got my horse wagon, my horse machinery. I intend to go back east to the Amish, where I have friends, and get me more of it. I still love my horses, and I think that's about the level where we can best operate.
Well, I had a dream ever since 1935, in effect. And I went on my 1.5-year cruise to find an appropriate corner where our young group of then idealists could lead the kind of life we wanted. With the war and the other things interfering, not much came of it. But I stuck to this idea through thick and thin, through my years of working in Alaska as a builder, as a homesteader, politician, if you will. And at times, of course, raising a family, it wasn't so easy. I began to think that possibly my youthful dreams were entirely wrong. I was beginning to think that possibly I shot over the mark, that I expected too much, that everybody can't be wrong, that I better reconsider some of my ideas, you know, and I was getting a little bit possibly depressed, not cynical yet, but depressed and disheartened. I found myself very much in tune with the things to come, and then I realized I was nothing but an avant-garde to what's happening now. It's funny that in life, look, take guys talking about a fishing trip or a hunting trip, they talk about the one where the weather was the lousiest, where they sloshed the most, where they were almost killed by packing a pack to the worst. That's the memorable stuff. And somehow, because it appeals to man's innate, atavistic, you might say, need for adventure and for hardship. Man is essentially not meant to take it easy. Man gets a certain satisfaction, even if it's self-imposed occasionally. So if you're young, get some of these challenges, like it or not, it answers in a need somehow or other, and later on that's what you remember, and it's something positive will ultimately come out of it. Okay. Get up, get!